But, you know, when I say in my comments, I mean, obviously I don't promote Devin. So people think that I'm bitter towards it. I'm really not. If I promoted him, I wouldn't be saying he was boring. I admit that.
Hearn is only loyal to who is signed to him on a contract. You know, and what I'm telling y'all is, in business, it's always important to have long-term relationships because it helps sustain a business long-term. It's not always about, you know, what's trendy. You know, this guy, he doesn't want to re-sign with me, I'ma bash him. Maybe he just found a better deal that made more sense for him and his family at that particular time. Lose credibility in the sport, it seemed like the more that they open up their mouth. You know, like I said before, you know, the best way to handle situations like this, okay, a guy doesn't want to re-sign with you, you know, you keep doing what you're doing because you're going to have to do that anyway, and maybe y'all could work together in the future. You know, Gervonta Davis and Eddie Hearn. You know, Gervonta hasn't worked with him yet and is already calling him a snake. You know, credibility in business matters long term because the fighters that's coming up looking up to these guys, they're like, man, I don't want to get Don King. You know, I don't want to not have the complexion for the protection. I signed with Bob. You know, then I got a super fight coming up when I'm not with Bob. And now I'm trash. I'm garbage. Don't nobody fuck with me. The more that these fighters continue to do better, you know, Eddie Hearn is going to be punching the air. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of these guys, you know, got so much potential that hasn't even been realized yet. You know, a lot of these guys got potential that hasn't been realized yet. You know, so when these guys continue to go up, because these guys still early in their careers. These guys are still early in their careers, you know, and what you do is like how Under Armour with Steph Curry, they yoked him up quick. They yoked Curry up quick. So that whole run Curry had, them championships, them run, you know what I'm saying? He was wearing Under Armour in all them runs. You know what I'm saying? So now that he's not signed to us no more, it don't really hurt because now he's at the end of his career. You know, what they did is they blew their load too quick. Haney is young, man. Haney got another 10 years fighting in him. You know, and you gonna burn your relationship with him this early? You gonna burn your relationship with him this early? What if he become undisputed at 147? He definitely gonna be punching the air then. You understand what I'm saying? And what's happening is these guys don't like that these guys have the ability to think for themselves, hire people to, you know, hey, yo, that deal don't really make the most sense. As opposed to back then where you see a couple digits on a piece of paper, you like, man, I'm rocking and rolling. And is these guys are getting smarter. You know, these guys are able to look at these interviews. You know, these guys are able to scout these promoters and see what makes sense and what don't make sense. You know, these guys can afford lawyers and teams to look over contracts, to point out discrepancies that might not be beneficial to them long term. And like I said, these promoters don't like it. These promoters don't like how they can't pimp these fighters no more. You know, you can't put a couple digits on a piece of paper and say, hey, go with it, because these fighters are already eating already. The blueprint is already there. You know, these promoters are stepping stones, but, you know, when you get to the position that you want to in the sport, you call all your shots. You know, these guys are, you know, wanting to be somebody's full-time employer when these guys are understanding the value of being a contractor. You know, and each performance that you have, each accolade that you add, you know, is better when it's coming to the negotiating table. And these guys understand that now. You know, in this sport right now, holding out can get you more. You know, and like I said, you know, these guys, what they're doing is they're not fortifying long-term relationships with these fighters. And, you know, them not investing in those long-term relationships is going to bite these promoters in their ass the more that these guys continue to realize their talent.
Yeah, no, you know, alhamdulillah, you know, I'm happy that, you know, I'm able to, you know, be back where I once was, back champion, back the man of the division. You know, this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to take on the best guy so that, you know, I could be that guy, be the man of the division. And it feels good to be back.